Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a follow-up question which relates to the climate report, specifically wording around the climate report. You kind of answered this before in response to Amanda's questions, but not in a way that I would consider to be necessarily satisfactory. You did say in your transition plans, or I should say NAB said in transition plan requirements this year, that it would expect Scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions disclosures, and then also in the next dot point that it would expect interim and long-term targets. Now it's not clear from that if those two are separate criteria, as in if you just expect your clients to disclose those emissions, but not actually have targets that cover all Scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. And the reason that is very important, as you said, we can appreciate that Scope 3 is not always the easiest thing to address, but for a fossil fuel company where 90% of their emissions are Scope 3 from the end use of their burning of coal, oil and gas, which is always a conscious business decision, we would want to see that being assessed by NAB. So is that going to be the case with NAB's transition plan?
As I said, the detail will be worked out, but it's impossible to evaluate a fossil fuel company without looking at its Scope 3, as you say. And the good news is that in the fossil fuel business, the data is much more easily attainable for what the Scope 3 is going to be because you know the carbon content of the product. So, but that's not as true for many other businesses. And as I've tried to stress to everyone, the fossil fuel stuff is significant for the planet, but tiny in our exposures. We have significant issues that we're trying to address in construction, obviously because of the residential and commercial real estate. So iron and steel cement are of critical importance to us, and agriculture, of course, will be an area of considerable interest as and when people start identifying pathways for agriculture. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I understand your point, so thank you.
Second part to my question is around Paris alignment, which is what you said.
Yes, I did.
So the reason I ask this question is because amongst your peers, Paris aligned can mean different things. For instance, with Westpac, Paris aligned means 1.5 degrees. With ANZ, it's not exactly clear. With Commonbank, it's well below 2 degrees, which is a far more, going up to 2 degrees, as I outlined in my speech, is a far more catastrophic scenario. So can you provide some clarification on what NAB means by Paris aligned? Is it 1.5 or is it well below 2?
My understanding of what the COP in Paris thought it meant was well below 2 and aiming for 1.5. I thought that was the communique from the Paris conference.
Is NAB's commitment not to limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees?
So I think what we've said is our ambition is to support a 1.5 degree, and our net zero 50 target for the bank is to target a world of 1.5 degrees, but that individual transition plans may follow, because the pathways that are being developed in many industries are aligned to Paris. We don't necessarily have authoritative data for what 1.5 means.
Do you see the inconsistency between being committed to 1.5 and not requiring your clients to be?
I understand exactly what you're saying. The problem is that's what's physically possible for us to do.
Maybe the commitment needs to be changed then. Thank you.
No, I think what needs to be changed is Paris.